My name is Prathap Suthan. Most people call me Pat, and you can call me that. So I stay in Delhi. I live in advertising. And I come from the south of India, from a very small city called Trivandrum. We are actually the capital city of coconuts. We are also near and surrounded by backwaters. And Kerala is famous for backwaters and the greenest of them. And it is also home to Sri Padmanabha Swami. Okay, it's an avatar of Vishnu, whose temple is worth more than $1 trillion, trillion US dollars. It is the richest temple in the world. That is 1 followed by 12 zeros, if you want to get the number of dollars in. So I'm essentially a copywriter, and I write every day. On LinkedIn, I write long format copy. On Insta, Facebook, I write, on Insta actually I write smaller, but on Facebook it's a mix of that. So essentially for the social media world today, I retain my long copy skill. I also use my short copy skill for social media. And I write a poem or a verse every day, and I publish it at 6:15 a.m. in the morning, and I've been doing this for more than 9 years. It doesn't matter where I am in the world, I would do that. This is what I wrote today, this morning. At times I write roses, other times I write smiles, sometimes I write swords. Okay, and this thought can obviously be expanded as well. Sometimes I do that. So right now, however, there's going to be no writing. Okay, I'm going to talk in pictures, and the best pictures ever. I don't have any jargon to offer you, absolutely zilch, no tech insights, no complex algorithms. All I have is a bit of common sense, that's all, and that's pretty rare these days, okay? Because the world, if you look at it, is going through a crisis of this particular ingredient shortage. So here's a question for you. And as people who work with brands and for brands, who is your competition? Who is Coke's competition? Who is Nike's competition? Who is Apple's competition? Okay, and it's blink, blink, blink. Come on. It's none of the obvious answers. It's not Adidas or Reebok or anything like that. Now, who's Nestle's competition? Who's Ford's competition? Who's Kit Kat's competition, so to say? And it's again blink, blink, keep on blinking. And that is exactly what is wrong. Because most of us think traditionally, and we think this is the competition. Right? We define competition like this. There's a horde of these brands which are against you. Now, in the last few years, the world has completely changed. Now, once upon a time, ever since Nepal, that's a long time back, had golden mountains, being in charge of brands was fantastic. But that life has checked out. That time is over. That age is nowhere there. For brands and their marketing cowboys in Nepal and elsewhere, everything has changed. Nothing is the same anymore. It hasn't changed yet. If it hasn't changed yet, it'll change tomorrow. And if it doesn't change tomorrow, it has changed yesterday already. That is how quick these changes are. So there was a time when we listened to the radio. Voice of America, All India Radio, Radio Australia, Sri Lanka Broadcasting Corporation. I think Radio Nepal is yours, right? And all the programs that they had. There was a time when we watched television. I remember sitting down in front of this dumb-looking thing. And all of us have, right? And watched some really sad presenters. And there was a time when we read newspapers. I know some of us still do, and I think somebody was talking about how, the print medium is coming up in Nepal, or coming back up again. And at least even in India, for some, this is still true. And then there was also a time when brands were kings, okay? Undisputed leaders. They held sway not in just this country or my country, they across the world. They spoke everything. They sponsored everything. Now forget about rulers and their thrones. They don't even have a chair. All brands did was spend a lot of money on advertising. They stood on the stage and talked down to customers. They spoke endlessly without listening to their audience. Some people were interested, some were slightly uninterested, and some were overtly uninterested. The younger lot was totally disconnected. And that is admitting that you are no longer in control of your present and your future. Okay? Little ones were getting bored with what we were doing. Young dads were getting bored. Young moms were getting bored. Almost the entire audience that you were targeting were getting bored. And yet, since advertising was the only official entertainment going on, all of us watched, brands just kept on spending more and more and more. Brands and clients spoke, and on that highway, the communication was just one way. It was broadcast. There was no technique for you to respond back. It was a rush, unstoppable, one after the other. They just slammed down on you. And communication channels were choked, much like this highway. This could be in America, in England, in Germany, France, Italy, everywhere. And it was also jammed like this highway. Now, this is a small trivia. This is the highway that I take to work every morning. And that is 24 lanes of traffic on one side of the road, and it is jammed. This is Gurgaon. Okay? Now, this is not 2 lanes of traffic. Can you see the other lanes? That's 24 over here, 24 over there. Okay, it's a little better now because of COVID. A lot of people now started working from home. Okay? So on the opposite side of the highway, there was very little traffic. So there was some chatter from consumers and customers, etc., and your target audiences, but no one listened to you. There was no feedback mechanism, and clients just ignored what they heard. So brands just rolled over them, all of us. They couldn't give a damn as to what you were saying, what you were thinking, what you were feeling. Others just bulldozed their way, spending tons of money, creating mindless, voluminous communication. Now, little did they know that the world was changing right under their noses. Consumer boredom was the indicator of what was to come. And then suddenly, wham, the internet arrived, okay, like a bolt out of the blue. And it arrived in all its glory, and it spread across the world, connecting all of us. Suddenly, we became part of one. And it brought with it a humongous potential of technology and incredible connections. It's almost like color came into a world of black and white. Soon, it was available across computers, mobiles, and every other device. 360 degrees of wraparound communication. I mean, today, when everyone talks, people talk to fridges today, washing machines. They are their best friends. Alexa, right, Siri. We have machines and technology to talk to, right? Most brands, now, when this happened, most brands had no clue. Most brands just adapted their ATL. So if a brand wanted to go digital, they would take their TVC, put it on YouTube, and that was digital. Unfortunately, that is not digital, right? That was what it was. So the world was going to get turned completely and upside down because these people arrived on the scene. Social media arrived, the game changer, life changer, and everything changer. This arrived onto the scene. And soon it was like what the discovery of fire was. People found it, and it changed the entire dynamics of power, existence, and relationships. And it became a revolution. And imagination and conversation caught fire. Everyone who had a device had a new power with them. And everyone couldn't get their heads out of the screens. That's why we buried ourselves in those screens. They all wanted to talk. We all wanted to be seen. Everyone wanted their 15 minutes of fame because we haven't been heard for all these years. Suddenly, you had a chance, you had a platform to be heard. So one-way communication now became two-way. Some brands understood this monster they were facing. Some others didn't. Well, some still don't. And that is a fact. So there was immediate equality. People discovered the power of speech. Brands were spoken to, and people tore into big organizations. Mothers quarreled and fought for their rights with huge corporations. They demanded changes. They shouted for corrections. Remember Dove and what Dove happened? Right? It was all triggered by these things. Even kids had a thing or two to say, and brands started listening to them. Some, of course, was manufactured, but still people understood the power of this. And when social media, digital, and tech get together and help people to raise their voices, most of the brands lost their nerve because they didn't understand what was happening, and they still don't. So voices of the common man ganged up against big brands. They didn't know what hit them. Consumers hijacked the highways of communication, so to say. They blocked advertising channels, sites, programs, all with their comments and hates and dislikes and everything, and criticism. The era of consumerism suddenly changed. They reversed the whole thing. People had true power. In fact, consumers took violent control, and the long suppressed voice and power of the people lashed back. So brands weren't ready. Those who responded made a mess of it. And I'm sure some of us remember the number of nights that we had to spend in offices, the sleepless nights, and the working weekends that we had because some consumer wrote something and we had trouble on our hands. We had to fix it, at least in India. A lot of things used to happen like that. Brands still don't know what to do. Okay, they're confused, fidgety, scared, and trying to have conversations. Because it's a new territory. They were not used to listening to people. Okay, their intermediary was the agency. We would tell them what consumer feedback was, but suddenly consumers are talking to them straight, and they hadn't actually chatted with consumers. Now here is my own example. This is in June 2013, Cannes Lions Advertising Festival. It was not the first time for me. I know Cannes actually better than a few Indian cities. It was my 10th or the 11th trip to France. This time, the first time was in 1992. I can actually speak a bit of French. Je parle français un peu, because of my Cannes trips. This time, however, in 2013, when I went to Cannes Lions, I was there as part of jury, okay? And as usual, my favorite phone was with me, my favorite brand, which was Vodafone. That connection was with me. And I've had the same number and the same connection for many number of years. And it has always worked for me across the world all the time, without a problem. In fact, I ought to have been an extremely good customer for them because my average bill was about 25,000 to 30,000 rupees, sometimes even a lakh. Because those days, you will be charged for people calling you as well. You remember those days? Incoming charges as well, right? And because I used to head the country and a few other countries, I had international calls to make, and those were expensive. And for me, because I used to pay them so much of money, I had no reason to suspect that things could go wrong. So one day in the middle of my judging, I realized there's no signal, there is no network, and my phone went kaput. no service. Dead as a dodo, as they put it. That was it. There was nothing there. So I was aghast, lonely, and out in the open. There was no SMS, no email, no call from Vodafone. They just disconnected me. And my office told me that they had disconnected me because I had exceeded the limit that they had put, which was because of roaming, international roaming, right? 25,000 bucks. I had crossed that. I remember I WhatsApped a picture out of my hotel window to my son. And later on, I figured out that one picture alone, which was just the blue sea and a white yacht over there, cost me 5,000 rupees. I'm not kidding. I still have that bill with me. So, life to look barren, empty, I was alone. I was like, it was almost like a friend stabbed me in the back. How could they do this to me? I just couldn't believe it. After all these years, they dumped me. I was like a kid, betrayed by my best friend. Eventually, my office paid the money, and they reconnected back to the network. But how could they do this to me? How could they have even thought of pulling the plug, right? I mean, I could have been adrift somewhere and, with no connection. I could have been stranded on an island without a connection. I could have been lost in some place like northern Sudan, right, where there was nothing except some goats. I could have been bumbling around in the Amazon. I could have crash landed in Alaska, involved in an accident, needing help. Or I could have been in serious trouble, kidnapped by these gentlemen, by an African tribe. Now, come on, didn't the years of my association with them and the amount of money I gave them, did it mean something? Shouldn't it have meant something? How could they have just leave me in the middle of the world without my connection? And imagine, you are in a place, you want to get in touch with home, or your home wants to get in touch with you. This is the only thing, right? How could they have done it? So then I realized, bloody pug. You remember? Vodafone had this. I hated this dog the moment it happened, And that's the time I realized that I was a nobody. I was just another money-making machine for these guys, and they felt threatened because I didn't pay 25,000 bucks. I had exceeded my limit, and I tell you, this did not follow me anywhere. This dog. It was actually a cold, heartless, and a nasty wolf. That pug turned into this for me. So brands have no soul, no love, no consideration, and I was just a statistic, just a number. So I was angry and I was pissed. I was hurt and I was aching. And I was ready for revenge. So my weapon was Facebook and social media per se. So as soon as I came back from France, I went on Facebook and said, "Hey, Vodafone India, how can you switch off my connection without informing me? Happy to help or happy to hassle?" I put this out. Small little post. And, soon my friends started sharing it. But nothing happened. There was absolute silence. I expected, I was somebody important in the advertising industry. Right? Vodafone should have known about me. Nothing happened. I said, what is this? Maybe I was crazy to expect a miracle. Maybe. However, Airtel heard me. They picked it up loud and clear. They picked up the message. And I got a call from them. For someone who was drowning in self-pity, hurt and anguish, I was overjoyed. In fact, even if BSNL, the national carrier, if they had called, I would have been happy, right? Airtel called me. So, and the fact that someone responded was the big thing. The next morning, I was rescued. And Airtel threw me a lifeline, And they empathized with me, they listened to me, they understood, and they said, we're going to come and meet you. So they came to my office and helped me port my number. So same number, different service. And I was safe and sound. I was on a friendlier ship. And remember, Airtel is Indian, Vodafone is British. So I said, fuck it. I'm going on an Indian ship. So in exactly 3 days, I moved to Airtel. And all the other details which had to be discussed would be shared with me later. So I felt as though I could trust someone. On the other hand, there was still no news from Vodafone. Okay, just silence. And then, when my phone became active again, I wrote a second post. It says, happy to leave you, Vodafone. It was one long mother of a post. In 1 hour, I had the entire advertising industry, involved in it. I think this eventually had 600 shares. So you can imagine the kind of, So, so people called up and said, look, I'm so glad that you did it. Because they also felt that Vodafone deserved it. Because if you had a problem, they didn't want to solve it for you. Because, you couldn't complain. The brands were kings. So by noon, it had been tweeted and, retweeted many times. In fact, Exchange for Media, which is a media company, they carried it. First post carried it. It got liked, shared, and discussed. And by late afternoon, Vodafone finally responded. The COO called me, and he had just one thing to say. This, I'm sorry, okay, for what happened. The head of the brand then spoke to me and apologized. She was upset. More importantly, she was a friend of mine too. And she knew that these guys had been unfair. The entire customer service, they confessed that I actually became a customer case study. So they were all called in for a presentation into the conference room, and my face was there on their TVs. So my photo was there on their presentation. So one incident inspired sweeping changes in their customer policy. And they sort of understood their mistake. And then they said, before we disconnect someone, we will first read up on their profile. We'll look up at their value, where they are, what they're doing, before they cut you off. So those changes came in because of this incident. Okay, so I had actually set the cat among the pigeons for them. Okay, and my incident made them lose multiple high-value customers, not individuals, corporates. So it was a business loss for them. So it was almost like these guys were all waiting for someone to fire a gun, and they all stood and said, yes, this is exactly what we wanted to say. Okay? Now, as a contrast, after all this happened, Airtel came to my office the next day. They came with flowers. They came with chocolates. I'm not exaggerating. They came with chocolates. They came with a freshly baked cake. They came with a gift. Because I'm a writer, they gave me a pen. Mont Blanc, expensive. Plus a package that was exactly 1/3 of what Vodafone had given me. So you can imagine how much money they were making off me. 1/3 of what Airtel, I was paying Vodafone, along with a dedicated customer service, which had 4 layers. So in case you're not available, somebody else is. If that person is not there, somebody else is. It was almost like that. And I had a credit limit of 1.5 lakh for international. Okay? And then I was given something called the solitaire status. I mean, everything they did touched me here. My ego was pacified, and I felt somebody, how do I put it? Somebody important. I felt being seen, And I actually wish I made this, at that time I actually wished I made that change earlier. Why did I even go through with Vodafone for so many years? I should have just switched long time back. And it is all possible because of social media, nothing else. Now, so what can a brand take away from what happened in my case. What can a brand learn from this incident? Okay, what are the lessons out there? Well, they could have held me back, right, very nicely, made it very tempting. They could have actually locked me up in love. They could have done that. They could have given me incentives. What was stopping them from doing it? Ego, nothing else. They could have stopped me, they could have blocked me, they could have kept me away from scoring goals. They could have played a very different game with me. They could have actually used their ears to listen to me. And they chose not to. Because if someone complains, answer that complaint, respond to that complaint, because that's the only thing. Whether you solve it or not is not the issue. Does the brand respond? I mean, you look at the social media pages of almost every company. You have hundreds and thousands of bad comments, right, or asks which go unanswered. And that is immediately killing your relationship with that brand. So they could have actually turned this, much like what Airtel did, into an opportunity. They could have awarded me or rewarded me for meritorious service, so to say. They could have put medals on my chest. You know, it wouldn't have cost them anything to have done that. And I still would have been in love with them. I would have held hands with that brand. Right? I would have been their #1 ambassador. I would have gone out of the way to say things for them. You know? But they didn't. So this is definitely something which they can take. So what should a brand take home? What lessons should they bring back? What should the category bring back? Lots of learnings. And what should an entire industry take back? Right? With so many customers showing their displeasure on social media. Now, in case brands want to listen, and a lot of guys are sitting here, I have some thoughts, nice warm air thoughts, okay, rising thoughts. One, learn to be as quick as customers. Customers have nothing else to do in life, okay? We will be cheetahs on our feet. Something bad happens to us, we will be the first to get onto social media and complain. So be fast. Keep those eyes and ears open 24/7, because on any social media platform, whether you wake up at 2 a.m., 3 a.m. or 5 a.m., somebody is up and awake. So customers are always awake. And plus, it is a social global medium. So somebody is awake somewhere at that time. Invest in an efficient listening response system, and one that works. People are good, people can man these systems, but people also need to sleep, right? So there are enough and more automated systems available. There is BrandWatch, Keyhole, Sprout Social, Meltwater. There's so many, tools out there for you to buy and keep. Now, this is important. I know ego is very important for a brand, because brand is a brand. You're a billionaire or multi-billionaire, right? And you have an ego. But in today's age, you need to get off that pedestal. You can't stand there and say, raise your hand if you're sure. No, you can't. You have to get off that pedestal. Stop instructing your customers, because they talk down to you. They talk to you as a school principal, as a policeman, as a judge. They look at you and say, aisa mat karo, aisa mat karo. They keep doing that to you. We don't want to listen to you. Today we have choices. Who are you? You're nobody to me. The best you can do is be their friend. Be their friend, put your arm around them, and because it's social, it's very much allowed. Right? I mean, it's not a physical putting your arm around. This is allowed. Understand that every customer has the potential to bring you down, as well as resurrect you. Recently, something happened in my life. A big company did not give me the money that they owed me. I got in touch with somebody else. They helped me get the money back. Shubha, I don't know whether you know this. Okay? I'm not going to say the name of the brand, insurance. And I got my money back, all of it. And it was about 40 lakhs. Okay? That's a lot of money. And I wrote a thank you note for that brand which helped me do it. That got 4,000 likes on LinkedIn and some other 3,000, 4,000 likes on Facebook. Shared tremendously. Every employee of theirs shared it, right? So you can curse them and you can also bless them. And that power remains with you. Okay, you have to show your human side. We also understand that brands are also humans at times because people are there behind those brands. We are fine if you make mistakes, admit it, apologize, I'm okay with it. But we don't want brands to be like this cold, efficient creatures. It's okay, you make a mistake, we are fine, we'll forgive you. Do mad things, because that is what we are. We don't follow a certain line. As customers, we don't follow a strict line. We like going out of the way, right? Especially people like us in advertising. We don't normally think between two lines. We think we go away from it, right? That is why we are creative. We are a creative business because of that. And learn from experiences, even if they are messy experiences. Share it with them. Stand for good things and good feelings, right? And remember this, and this is not something which I made up, but this is the truth. Brands live in your hearts, and products live on shelves and factories. So you need to belong here, inside here, nowhere else. Don't hard sell your brand in social media space. Don't be a big brother and bully me, because I also know bullies. Okay, either I will bully or somebody else will bully. Be friendly and be useful to me. Understand that this goes beyond advertising and entertainment and brands. This is no longer about retailing or selling. This is real life, where real people are involved with emotions, with blood and flesh. And finally, be patient. No matter what you do, a chick will only hatch after 21 days. If you're lucky, after 20 days, right? Give it time, because trust takes time to grow. Trust actually grows slowly like a mango tree, but trust falls very quickly like a mango. It takes 1 second for trust to fall. So the customers of today's age is a whole new animal. That is, people who are sitting in this room qualify for that. And you guys play a very, very different ball game. Okay? We will protest, we will shout, we will rant, we will yell, we will throw eggs on your face. And this is the voice of your generation. We will argue, fight, and beat you with common sense. We are not going to hold back our punches at all. We will even call you names and show you the middle finger. Okay? It won't be pleasant. Brands can't come back at me for that. You will have to bite your tongue, because brands can't behave like how I can. Because technology isn't going away. It's only going to give people more power. You know what happened in Bangladesh, right? What technology did. People have made Sri Lanka, people have made governments fall. Systems have been overrun. And in Delhi, even parties and politicians have been ambushed by people. So this man, the Aam Aadmi guy, actually took on a fight, right? So, and you think your brand is safe? You think you can defend your brand? You think we will leave you alone? No armor is going to save you. You can buy the most, expensive armor. It's not going to save you. Bullshit, it'll save you. Nothing is going to save you. So dear brand, the time of being Hulk is over. The time of being Rambo is over. The time of being Ravan is over. You are no longer a formidable mothership. You're no longer USS Invincible. We can easily sink you, and we will sink you. Because I am no longer just a faceless consumer in the supermarket Or am I an invisible customer online? I am your competition. And I know that. Thank you. Yeah. That's all I have to say. Any questions? You have? Okay.
Hi, Pratapji. I
Yeah.
am Navin Sister from Water Communication. You have mentioned in your brief about you have a visionary behind the iconic India signing and incredible India. Can you tell us some stories behind it so that we can learn from here in Nepal also?
Okay, so Incredible India is something which I did not create first. It was created by Ogilvy. There was a guy called V. Sunil who was the main architect of that campaign. And Ogilvy lost the business, I think, about 2 years after it started. And then I took it on, and I continued with it for about 7 years. Uh, so that's something which was there, and I took over it. But of course, I did deliver on it. I won multiple awards, including the only global FE that was ever won from Asia. So that also, because of advertising that worked in Europe. So that's fine. Let me ask you, well, let me answer the one thing on India Shining. So a lot of people look at me and say, oh, you brought a whole government down because of your campaign, which is not true. Now, in fact, India Shining was the second avatar of a campaign that the government did. This was when Mr. Vajpayee was the Prime Minister. 2013, 2003, right? At end of his thing. At that time, they had the finance minister was a gentleman called Yashwant Sinha. And the defense minister of India was a guy called Jaswant Singh. So everything was right. It was a peaceful time, so to say. The economy was fine. But what happened to the economy was there was no growth in the economy. You know, there was no growth. I mean, the Sensex, it wasn't growing up. It was just stagnant. So the government said, I mean, why isn't the economy growing? Because we have all the incentives. People aren't taking loans, people aren't doing this, people aren't doing that. And let's do one thing, let's find out an expert who can come in, figure out some answers for us. So they called in a British company. This kind of business that these guys do, it's called financial forensics. We've heard of forensics in police criminal investigation, but this is financial forensics. The company's name was Financial Dynamics from London. So they came down, the government briefed them, so they went around, researched, met a lot of people, and then came back and presented their answers. And they said, look, your country is all fine, but the people don't believe in what you guys have achieved, okay? There is a believability, there's a gap. So you have to inject optimism into the economy. People need to know that you're doing well. If India is doing well, then people need to know. So you need a campaign for that. And the only way to reach out is by doing a multimedia campaign. So there was a pitch, many agencies were called in. My agency at that time, I was in an agency called Grey. So we were not called. So a lot of other companies were. And finally, a campaign was approved. Rediffusion was the agency at that time. And a campaign came out. In the line that they had was, India's time has come. That was the line. They showed a picture of a farmer sitting on a charpai, okay, with a rainbow behind him and speaking on a cell phone. So it's like cell phones and technology have reached the interiors of the country. And it had the Prime Minister's picture on one side and the Indian Ashoka emblem on the other side. So I remember seeing that ad, full page ad. I saw it and I said, aha, propaganda. Flip the page. So they spent 100 crores behind that. But economy was still like that. Absolutely no movement. And the money for this was approved by a joint parliamentary committee. So which means both opposition and the ruling government had agreed to this. At that time there was a switch. Portfolios changed. Jaswant Singh became the finance minister. Yashwant Sinha became the defense minister. And then Jaswant Singh said, what is happening? We spend money, nothing is happening. And then the reports came in saying that economy is still fine, but the campaign didn't work. So let's do a new campaign. And then agencies were called. That time we were called in. So at least I knew what shouldn't be done. I knew it shouldn't look like propaganda. So that learning was with me. So I think 25 agencies pitched, and I pitched our campaign, and he loved it, right? And he said, let's go. So on October 15th, I think, the campaign started. And that day, India was playing Pakistan or India was playing Australia in Ahmedabad. And of course, the live telecast was happening. The match started at about 9:30, 10 o'clock. I was watching. And of course, that day the newspapers had broken with the ad, and I had a few calls from my friends saying that good ad, etc. And Sehwag was batting. So it was Tendulkar and Sehwag who were opening the innings. And Sehwag scores consecutive 3-4s, 3 boundaries. And then Gavaskar says, oh, this is very good. At that time, the cameraman cuts to this one spectator in the crowd, and he had this full-page ad of India shining with him. Okay, and then Gavaskar said, India is shining. So there was a reference to good things happening with that slogan made on this, which is more powerful, I think, than any ad. Because suddenly, India shining as a term got familiar. Because cricket, everyone watches cricket, right? So that's where the damn thing took off. So and then in about 10 days, the Sensex started rising. It breached 5,000 and then of course it has never looked back after that. So that was why that campaign was done. And then there were some internal state elections that happened so that the campaign was pulled off. And then there was an international edition of the campaign, which was published across almost every large newspaper in the world. Financial Times, New York Times, Washington Post, The Guardian, Straits Times in Singapore, all that. And then on the 1st of Jan 2004, India's Forex, or rather, the ROI, return on investment. So I think we spent about 70 crores on that campaign. Do you know how much money came in? Because the whole idea was, one, to boost the economy, second, to also get FDI, which is foreign direct investment. Do you know how much money came in? 140 billion US dollars, which is far more than what they have ever got even now. So that was the impact of that campaign. It was a very successful campaign for what it was designed. But then what happened was, there's a gentleman called Advani, you must have heard about him, who's in BJP. He decided that this campaign, if it has worked, should now be made into the election campaign, because the election campaign was happening. Time was coming. Now, please understand that all politicians, everywhere, in whichever country, they understand the business very well, far more than us. An English line would never go as an election campaign in India, ever. Ab ki baar Modi Sarkar, the kind of lines that happen. So these are the kind of lines that the politicians use. Even those guys were supposed to be using that. India shining was completely the odd man out. But because it was successful, and genuinely successful by bringing in a lot of money, the government said, let's go for it. And they coined a Hindi version of that as well, called Bharat Uday. Now, this campaign was designed to inspire people who had money in their pockets to go and invest in the stock market. It was supposed to touch technocrats and businessmen to take loans from the government and start new business for capital, for capex and things like that. So on that count, it all worked, but it was meant for the urban audience, right? The upper audience, upper crust. That's when the Leo Burnett campaign came. Aam Aadmi ko kya mila? What did the poor man get? Which is true, because this campaign was never intended for them. So that campaign sort of completely got, rammed into the belly of this campaign and punctured it. So BJP lost the election. I mean, they were very sure that they would win it, but unfortunately what happened was they used the wrong campaign. It was a good campaign for its cause, employed for a wrong thing, didn't work, failed. So wherever I go, I hear this thing, you brought a government down. And I must tell you one thing, and this is something which happened at a brand meeting in Bombay. This was, I think, 2003, end of 2004, beginning. So it was a big meeting. Piyush was there, Prasoon was there, all the big guys were there. And I'm also part of the WPP thing, right? I was in Grey, I was the head of Grey. So my flight got delayed. So I was about 15 minutes late walking into the conference room. And I walked in and someone said, hey, here comes India shining. And people started laughing, okay? Piyush Pandey happened to be in the audience. And he raised his hand, he walked up to the stage and he said, why did you guys laugh? When he walked in, why did you guys laugh? So somebody said India Shining campaign. He said, okay, now let me tell you something. He said, look, all of you guys have done campaigns. It's going to stay with the people. It's going to be remembered. About 5 years max, 10 years max. After that, it fades away. But the campaign, the one that he did, whether it brought the government back or brought another government in, is different because it is linked to the history of this country. Because it is attributed to the change in government, right? So his campaign is going to stay forever. As long as there is a timeline of Indian politics and Indian history and governments, his campaign, and he is going to be remembered. So don't laugh at him. So that is how a lot of other people have interpreted it. I hope I answered. Any other questions?
Yeah, so one from my side.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much for the wonderful way of telling story from the audience or user's perspective. Just being from economy from Nepal, I just wanted to ask, because Nepali entrepreneurs are constantly competing to the global brands, right? So, because at the end, what matters is like you said, is the user's perspective, right? So, what should Nepali brand do something that they could be able to compete and also retain their users' audience?
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
it's an easy question actually. See, if it is something like, let's say, ethnic fashion, okay, where obviously there are international brands also out there, but ethnic fashion is something which is all about Nepal, right? It's all about your culture, and you can talk your language versus somebody else coming and talking. That's a strength that you can use, and you can use this. Now, the moment, there was this soft drink, Kibu, right, we just saw. Now there, I don't know, I haven't had that drink. I don't know what I need to know what the competition for that brand is, as in the physical competition. What is it fighting? What category is it in? Because then you need to know what is your fight. Because if it's about calories, then the fight is about calories. If it's about taste, then the fight is about taste, right? Now, is there a consumer research which gives you more insight into this? Then you know what you're going to fight. But you should know exactly what you're fighting. The what, needs to be defined. If you don't know the what, there's nothing you can do. Right? You can't have a campaign answer 5 whats. It has to be 1 what. What is it that you have to say? Chisel it down, bring it down to that one little thing which can have its own creative version of doing it. So it will go from product to product, category to category, right? And then you need to interface what is it that from a Nepali mindset would allow me to place that product in the consumer's mind. And there you use language, action, emotion, I don't know, whatever. So it's an easy thing, and this happens in India as well. We have a lot of brands which fight international brands, and they do it well. India has a very different problem now, and I see it, I consult for a couple of companies too. On an average, there are about 20,000 to 30,000 companies that get formed every year. And out of that, about 2,000 odd are companies that have spending money, as in advertising money, right? So that's in the space of 12 months, you have 2,000 more new brands out there, which has advertising budgets, okay? Both social, digital, and on traditional, right? Offline as well. But how many creative people do you have? For you to build a brand, you need an experienced creative hand or creative mind. Now, there are a lot of people have given up advertising, gone away, and they're doing something else. And you're left with about maybe 200 top creative people in India, seniors, and each of them are already handling 20 brands each, or responsible for 20 brands, personally handling at least 5 brands. They don't have the mind space to handle more. They don't. And because of which, out of the 2,000 brands, 20,000 brands that come in, or even the 2,000 brands which advertise, I think about 80% of them die because it is handled by people who have no experience. And that is the problem that is going to be facing this country, our market. Because you can't clone me, right? There's no way you can clone. You can't clone a Piyush Pandey. You can't clone anybody's head. Artificial intelligence will get you somewhere, right? But that is another problem which you're facing. So artificial AI is supposed to be across every industry today. And what is it doing? It is replacing, at least it's doing the normal tedious work, taking the tedious work off you. But then it is replacing human beings at some level, right? So human beings go off, people get more efficient, and soon even more people are laid off, right? You make faster products, better products. You're left with less and less consumers too, because if you're sacked, you don't have a job, you're not going to be shopping. So your number of consumers also come down. So it's a vicious thing. Finally, artificial system can create a brand, do the brand advertising, and get out of it. But who the hell is going to buy? Because nobody has the money to buy what you're making. So it's a very vicious circle. Fine, it'll create new categories, right? But then AI is powerful. AI will take in. I'll leave you guys alone.
All right.
Okay, bye.